What's up, everybody? I'm Kyle Fuller, your host of the Beat the Banks podcast, and I'm joined today by the one and only Mr. Wade Borth, our Chief of Insurance Relations and our head of our coaching and training program here at Factum Financial. And today, Wade, we're going to be having a conversation on infinite banking, what it is and what it's not.
Fabulous. That's so exciting. I mean, I'm pumped for this conversation because I've been doing IBC for the better part of probably close to 17 years. And it's amazing what we hear and think we know. And when we really get some thought and some honest perspective, that we've come to find out that it's not necessarily true. So today, that's why I'm so excited about this, is because this is the opportunity we have to kind of lay out some groundwork and help people kind of cut through the noise. I mean, how much noise are you hearing on the internet and all the Twitter world that we're talking about that just creates so much noise and so much confusion that people are getting lost, and they're like, hey, I don't know about this because there's so much back and forth. So I don't know if you're hearing a bunch of it, but I know I am, and I'm not even on the Twitter universe, and I hear about it. So
yeah, I think it's kind of running rampant right now, which is why we're trying to get more education out there directly from the source. So we're big proponents of the Nelson Nash Institute. He's the founder of the entire concept. And, we're both practitioners with the Nelson Nash Institute through their infinite banking practitioner program. So we're very protective of the IBC name. We always want to give credit where credit is due. And, the original source that this concept came from was Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. Now, there's a lot of spin-off books from this concept, Wade. I mean, a lot. And every time I meet someone, it's like, oh, yeah, I do whole life. I do infinite banking. I read this book. I'm like, great. That book was influenced by the source, which is this book. You're going to want to read this one, too. And, the further it gets away from that message I think Nelson had, I think the crazier it starts to become. And just the way marketing and social media is nowadays. And, to be honest, people are starting to wake up. I think people have had enough with some of the games that banks and Wall Street have been playing, and they're starting to look for, we'll just call it, more alternative routes, which is funny because whole life is not alternative or new. It's extremely old and very foundational. And so we're kind of getting back to basics, if you will. And this is why we're going to have this conversation today, to cut out and eliminate a lot of that noise, which, by the way, I used to teach because I was cut from a certain cloth of IBC that was not associated with the Institute. So I used to say some things that we're gonna cover on our do not say list for IBC today.
Well, and even with that said, and this is the conversation. I mean, we've all grown, right? So we don't start at the pinnacle. I mean, as far as our knowledge, and hopefully we never get to the pinnacle, because Nelson talks about that in his book. Is like, you can't have the arrival syndrome when it comes to knowledge. You have to constantly search for the truth, right? You have to constantly search for people that challenge your ideas and be open to that challenge. Because again, if you have the arrival syndrome, that means you're never going to learn more. So hopefully we never get to that pinnacle, but you don't start there. So, what I've shared with people, shared with agents that have come on, that I've had conversation with or come on board, they said, I wasn't saying this quite right. And I say, well, that's not the worst thing. You got people out of what I call an awful situation. And that's the utter dependence on Wall Street and the utter dependence on Wells Fargo or any other big bank, right? So it's moving in the right step. Now it's coming back and say, okay, let's bring some clarity, a little bit more clarity to your conversation. And that's really where I think, where we want to get to is we get more and more clarity in the conversation, right? But I would agree with you that people have had enough. This, what's going on is people are looking for something that's different. And when I say different, I mean back to the future type of difference, right? We're going to go back 50, 60, 80 years and say, this is exactly what people were using, in the early, 1900s. This is how companies of tremendous wealth grew their empires, because they were doing exactly what we're teaching.
And are still growing their empires.
Still growing their empires, right.
Using this very foundational asset.
Using this asset and using this thought process. So I'm excited to talk about, we look at it and say, IBC, what it is and what it's not. So let's start with a little bit of what it is. So maybe you can just, shed a little light on what's your perspective on what IBC is.
Yeah. So when we hear the phrase infinite banking concept, a lot of times people jump right to, oh, you're leveraging whole life insurance. That's kind of like, that's probably the most notorious one we see online. Buy a policy, leverage it, make money. We're going to cover that in a second.
Yeah.
But you got to back up. First and foremost, infinite banking is a mindset. You've got to have a paradigm shift and change the way you think about money in general. We talk about Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant. You got employees, self-employed individuals, and what we've all been told is if you want to win the money game, you go to the right side of the quadrant, become a business owner and investor. And that is not wrong. That is right. But there's another force that exists in the money game, and it's called banking. And no one's really talking about this. When you shift to a banking mindset, it is as drastic as a self-employed or employee moving into a full business owner category. It's a complete mindset shift. So that's the first thing that has to happen. Once you have that mindset shift and you start thinking like a banker, now there's a set of rules and processes you want to follow to make sure that you're implementing it properly. From there, if you insert the right tool, which is a whole life policy designed for this, with a strong mutual company, you put those three things together, you get something that I would say is very magical. And that is what I would describe as infinite banking.
Yeah, 100%. And what people don't realize until they've actually gotten into it and they start experiencing is, your point with Robert Kiyosaki is exactly right. The banking function lies behind all those areas. So you think about that. And again, you hear me say the banking function and not necessarily banks.
Right.
And so our job is to help you move from, an employee of the bank, as it were, to being the bank owner and the banking function owner. Because at the end of the day, it's the mindset of how you think about your money, how you treat your money. So you are the owner of your own personal financing system. And that's the real key, is that we have to change our mindset, knowing that we're starting a business. It is one of the most profitable business we're ever going to have. It can be one of the quietest businesses we're ever going to have. And at the end of the day, it's something that everybody's involved with and does. The question is, how much control do they have over the banking process in their life?
I think it's such a good explanation, Wade, because I think when people first hear this concept, and the reason I think it can be hard for people to shift is because they think like, I am starting a bank. And you're not really starting a bank, you're owning the banking function. So right now, whether you're an employee, self-employed, business owner, or investor, every one of those players in the money game relies on the bank to control their flow of money. And so all we're doing is positioning ourselves as an additional member in the money game. And it happens to be the person where the money is going to flow and be captured and controlled in a private environment for an employee, a self-employed, a business owner, or an investor. Owning that function in your life allows you to keep way more of the resources that flow through your life. Now, banking is a control and keeping conversation. It is exactly opposite of an investing conversation, which you tend to separate control with the expectation that you get more dollars back in the future. When you can put your investing strategy together with a banking strategy, now you just said it earlier, you own a business that is so profitable because you're already doing all the things. You've just been renting the function, like you said, instead of owning it.
Yep, exactly right. So, and I think this is where the confusion comes in, and this is where I think there's what I call cracks in the system to where the noise can get in, because people see that and they want to jump right to, well, what's the tool I use to make this happen? And I really have a strong belief that there's probably a 4-step process, and there's 4 areas and categories we can put this in. First one is understanding what the problem is. So what is the problem here? The problem is that we're just not saving enough money. We don't save enough money. And so therefore, when we want to grow our business, expand, do whatever it is, we have to go to the hard money lenders, or we have to go to the Wells Fargos of the world that have no interest in your well-being. And so we're going to people that are really working against us for what we want to do to grow, versus understanding what the problem is, that we just need to save more money and then save it in the right environment. So, that's the first step. And I'll run through these and we'll probably tear them apart real quick just so people know what they are. Then you want to go out and find some help to make this happen. So that's really the second step, is like finding somebody that helps, that understands this process, and then, understand what the process is. And that's a real key. So I think about, Tiger Woods. And again, you probably don't know. I mean, Tiger Woods, back when I was growing up, he was the guy that was making billions. He was the Michael Jordan of the world. And it wasn't his clubs, it wasn't his tools, but it was his swing coach that made him as good as he was, right? And he was always constantly asking for help and saying, I need help because I want the best professional to come and help me with what was his human problem. It wasn't his clubs. And that's where, most people want to look at it as like, hey, it's the whole life policy. And so they get kind of caught up in structure and how the policies are put together. But in all reality, it's important. But the most important thing is the human problem that Nelson describes in his book.
That's really good. I think you're spot on.
So, and then, if we go back up to, point number one is just saving enough money. So just imagine if you could save between 10 and 30% of your income, how much money you could have controlling that function in your life. And so we have to beat some human problems in order to make that happen.
And I think this is how you know that like IBC is not a scam. Like there's so much terrible marketing out there and people posting, hey, you can get all the money back from the liabilities you're owning, or you can get rich buying liabilities. It sounds hokey pokey because it is. And I know that because I used to teach those same things until I met you, started going to Truth Concepts, and I had to really work on some of the things I was saying because it looks truthy, we'll just call it that way. But when you get into the math does not add up. And so, people will look at this and be like, I don't know, this kind of seems fishy. It kind of seems like a scam. But the reason IBC is not a scam or a thing is because the entire principle of the concept is built off of a savings conversation. Nelson, in the first third of his book, doesn't tell you about any strategies or illustrations, nothing. It's, listen, we have a problem as an American culture and we don't save enough money. We're not disciplined enough that is a huge problem we're addressing. And that's when the strategy is legitimate because it requires you to actually work and change. It doesn't give you a product that magically solves all of your issues, which is how I feel a lot of financial products are sold. All you need is this fancy IUL and you're going to be set for retirement. Yeah. You don't even have to change anything. In fact, spend more money and you'll be better off with this thing. That's just not what IBC is.
Yeah, that whole idea of, you get rich buying liabilities. Yeah, I just don't know how does that happen? How do you spend more and then end up with more in your pocket, right? So it's the idea that we want to buy assets, right? Robert Kiyosaki teaches that as well. Buy assets that can give you the cash flow that you need. Don't go out and buy liabilities. Don't go premium finance if you want to grow your asset base or grow your dollars. It's because it's not going to happen. You say quite often is that, how do you say you can't save your way or you can't spend your way to prosperity?
Or something. If I said that, I'm proud of myself. That sounds pretty good. I don't think I said that though. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, and I know, we've had this discussion too, is that, it's built on the foundation of saving strategy. It's not, because you have to start putting your own money, beat the human problem first, take your money, save it, understanding, find a professional like you or I or somebody in the Factum team to help you understand that, hey, this is what the problem is. We're professionals. We're master craftsmen in our trade. And oh, by the way, the tool we use is this thing called properly structured whole life insurance. Now, the most important part of that relationship between you and the master craftsman, because again, you could give me all the tools you want as a carpenter, and I'm still going to build you a really, really, really poor shed, even though I have the best tools in the world, just because I don't have the knowledge and understanding of how to use those tools.
You need the education.
It's not the whole life. Yeah.
Right. You need the education and the implementation. So those four things that you referenced, Wade. So number one, people have a problem. They don't save enough money and then where they save it. Number two, they don't know where to find help. Once they kind of realize this is happening, then they start seeking out, well, I need someone to help me. The third problem is they don't understand the process and how to implement it properly. And the last thing is, understanding the tool that we use for IBC. But unfortunately, with social media, a lot of the marketing we see, the tool gets pushed to the forefront with all the features and benefits. But it doesn't do you any good if you have the right tool and you don't have any of the skills to actually work the tool effectively. And so I want to take some time to cover what we're calling the do not say list when it comes to IBC, or, this is for agents. Do not say these things if you're an insurance agent in the IBC realm. If you're a prospect looking to start independent banking, this is your Do not believe this list, okay? So the first one we hear a lot is, hey, you can earn 4% inside the policy, borrow at 6% using the loan provision, and get ahead. Now, there's some tricky math in there that makes it look like that is happening, but it is absolutely not happening because we're taking time out of that equation. We won't go into too much detail today, but if you start seeing that one online or hearing that, run for your
Run.
life. You got to get away and get to someone who's going to teach it to you properly. The next big one we hear a lot is, I'm getting all the money back from XYZ. I'm going to buy this vehicle. I'm going to buy this jewelry. I'm going to buy this vacation and get all the money back that I used to spend on the vacation. Absolutely not happening. You're not getting any money back.
You're paying for it.
You're paying for it. You're still paying for it. The policy is going to grow and compound whether there's a loan against it or not. So don't think that the loan provision is what's building all the cash value in your policy. The only way it builds is by premium being added. So that's the banking part, right? So Wade, a bank could not make money if they were paying their depositors 5 and loaning at 5, right?
Right.
They wouldn't be in business. It's only when the banker receives more money back than what they lent out that they actually make a profit. So if you are doing that, it's actually costing you more as a consumer. So we want to be careful that we're not being misled and thinking we're getting our money back. It's not happening. So be careful of that one. And then that ties into perfectly with the I'm getting rich buying liabilities. Those two kind of go hand in hand. So these three together, earn 4 and pay 6, get all the money back, and I'm getting rich buying liabilities. Those all kind of circulate into the same message and kind of feed off each other. And those are probably the most common ones that we see. And I'll just say good financial minds that are educated don't believe those things for a second. It's complete noise.
Yeah. And why is it such a passion for us to address that? For me, you can speak for yourself, but for me, I've been around long enough to know that I love this industry. I love what we do. I love the idea of IBC because it's really done. It's controlling yourself personally and being part of like-minded people through a mutual contract. I mean, it's the greatest industry in the world, but things like this hurt our credibility, quite frankly. And it's like, I'm so passionate about keeping it as clean as we possibly can keep it because there is a lot of noise out there, and that noise is confusing people. And I want to, the whole idea and part of, factum. What's the definition of factum?
Focus on success.
Seek the truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about the truth. I don't call it. It's about looking for the truth, and the truth is, it's just a process for you to how you flow your money and act like those that have money act. And that's really the tenets of IBC. Again, we take a look at Wells Fargo and then we take a look at Bank of America. We might not love those institutions, but what they do from that standpoint, how they run their business and where they keep their dollars is exactly what we should be emulating, not the things that they do beyond that.
Follow a system and model, right?
Yeah.
So just to reiterate, IBC is a mindset, then it's a process with rules to follow, then it's a product with features and benefits. So don't let someone teach you in reverse order. Don't get sidetracked with a policy and its features and benefits if you don't understand the rules, and more importantly, you don't have the mindset to implement it properly. You just won't have a good experience. So this IBC, and it's right in Nelson's book, it's not a sales tool for the life insurance world, right? This is a mission we're on. Like the families that we've served, what you and I have done for our families, Wade, could you ever go back and play the money game how most people are playing it now?
No, because you can't unlearn what you've seen. You can't unlearn, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so self-evident that what we're doing as Americans is so self-destructive. But once you see that, once you learn that, you're never going to unlearn it.
Once you see it from the banker's mindset, you will never be able to look at the money game the same way again. That's really what it's about. Once you're there, you could honestly become a banker with any tool you wanted. The mindset's the most important part. It's like you were referencing Tiger Woods earlier. Tiger Woods would still, beat me very, very bad in a game of golf, even if he had plastic clubs and I had the nicest ones that existed, right? It's just, there's no comparison. It's not the tool. It's the skill set level and your discipline around it. So IBC is not a sales tool. And it's completely built on the foundation of saving more money. So don't think for a second that you can borrow money or finance your policies when you're just getting started. So a lot of times we'll see, hey, take out a HELOC, premium financing, borrow money to start your first policy. That defeats, in my opinion, the whole purpose of the strategy, which is setting the proper foundation for you as an individual. We got to address the human behavior for us. Once we have that foundation built, sure, you could do some creative things to add more cash into your policy, but I wouldn't start there. It's the reverse order. Yeah. And so, going back to just what it is and what it's not, IBC is a mindset. It's not a sales tool. It's not a marketing campaign. It's not a gimmick. It's definitely not a feature of a life insurance policy. It is a mindset first and foremost that will literally change your life if you'll give it the right amount of time and find the right community to tie into of people that are actually living this and implementing it properly.
Yeah. And you listen to, you read Nelson's book and he says, it's not an instruction manual. It's a manual for a 10-hour course. Right. And you go to factandfinancial.com and we probably have, a good 14 hours of content that we can start looking at, start understanding what we can do, because we're here about how to educate people to a higher level and to have an understanding of this is not just being give it 5 minutes worth of attention and then set it and forget it. This is a tool we need to use in our life, the rest of our lives. And so it is this lifelong process that is in the background that's going to be running each and every day. So we need to give it the attention it deserves.
And honestly, it's meant to carry on after our life is over. If the education and the stewardship is there, we both are teaching this to our children so that our children grow up understanding banking principles and how to use them to their advantage in the money game, which takes it into a multi-generational conversation. Both things that we're very, very passionate about. Yeah. Teaching IBC the proper way, protecting the name that Nelson built, and then helping families take this multi-generational. And that's why you got to find an agent that has a plan for that too. I don't want to work with an agent that dabbles in IBC. I want the guy or gal who's obsessed with IBC and is going to put a plan in place for me with a team that after that agent's gone, there's someone that's still going to be there to help their children with those policies in the future. Find that team and partner up with them.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much. This is a great lesson. We could go so deep into this, but we'll continue this process. We'll continue this conversation because this conversation is hugely important to eliminate the noise, to get people seeing it as it's meant to be seen, and then taking it and implementing it in your life. And so we'll have many conversations about this. So I'll just encourage anybody that's listening to this podcast, continue to come back to Beat the Banks page, because there's going to be so much good content going forward.
And also feel free to check out our courses directly on our website, factumfinancial.com. We've got lots of videos. So this is great audio material for the audio consumers. But if you want the visual, the numbers, go to the course. Everything's laid out there. We'll disprove a lot of these concepts we're talking about too, is that you cannot earn 4, pay 6, and get ahead. All of it's on our course. So use those resources to your advantage, and we'll see everyone on the next episode.